Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Hank Cisco Show. Let's go.
Welcome to the Hank Cisco Show. I'm proud that I get to fill in for Hank today, a special friend. My name is Barbara Ann Zippi. I'm producer with Ciao Living Italian Style, and I also write for the Italian American Herald of Delaware Valley. You might have seen my column in there. But today, we have some very special guests today with us. But before we get into that, I wanted to give you some interesting Italian news with Hank's love of Italian things and the Italian culture. One of the other Italian newspapers in the region, the Italian Tribune, did a front page feature, and with Halloween coming, it's so eye-awakening to realize Hanna-Barbera, who we all know as the master cartoon people, and they've created the Flintstones and the Jetsons and so many more. Well, it was Joseph Barbera and William Hanna who got together, two Italians. So Casper the Friendly Ghost, the Smurfs, whatever your Halloween costumes are of choice, Daffy Duck, Yogi the Bear, know that the roots are Italian. So maybe you'll be able to pass along a little Italian culture to your children, since October is Italian Heritage Month. Another interesting thing, if you're Sicilian descent or even Italian American descent, but Sicily, this little town in Sicily called Sambuco, Italy, in Sicily, is actually giving away property because they've lost so many residents, and they're trying to build up the population of the town. And for €1 and more, a little more, you could actually get a property there. Maybe it needs a little bit of restoration. It's certainly high in a hilltop, one of the beautiful mountain towns. But who knows? Maybe you can get a pile of people together and decide to get a little retreat in Sicily. John Doyle, maybe we could do that in the future with some people here. Another interesting connection between the United States and Italian manufacturers. We all know Kellogg, and they are the ones who produce the Girl Scout cookies. Well, Ferrara in Piedmont, Italy, the Ferrara company, just bought the rights to the Girl Scout cookies. So they'll be producing the brownie bakers and some other one of our tasty treats here. But they might be doing new products for the Girl Scout line. And so could there be a Nutella Girl Scout cookie in our future? We won't know, but we'll certainly find out from seeing what the next revelations are when they premiere. They're so popular here. And last but not least, we have to talk about Venice, because John just got back from his travels to Italy this summer, and haven't gotten a chance to find out where he went. But if you've never been to the Jewel City, definitely go to Venice. It has been having some problems with cruise ships and coming too close. But if you have the chance to just go to Italy without a cruise ship, treat yourself to a couple nights staying on the island of Venice, on the islands of Venice, because you won't regret it. It's just the most romantic city in the world. And speaking of the sea and all things that are Navy, I'd like to welcome our special guest today, who is retired Captain Louis Cavaliere, who is the chairman of the Chapel of the Four Chaplains at the Navy Yard, and a longtime military man. And I'd like to welcome him to the Hank Cisco Show.
It's an honor to be here, Barbara, and I'm very pleased that we're doing this.
Well, I have to first of all thank you for your service, Lou, because getting to know you as a veteran has been an honor.
Well, the service was one thing, and this is a way that I can continue with that service as a retired person.
Well, it's such an interesting thing down the Navy Yard and everything that's happened to it. And I pulled this old picture from 1918 that shows how old the Navy Yard is. The history goes back a long time. Can you share a little bit?
The actual history of the Navy Yard even goes beyond that. The Navy Yard's been around since the American War of Independence, And also, it was not as active then, of course, but it started to really get active during World War I. It was active during the Civil War. The interesting thing about Philadelphia, most people don't realize this, is that this was the birthplace for the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps, was right here in Philadelphia. And the Navy Yard was always at Hog Island at the southern end of Broad Street. It really didn't get its big push, though, until World War I, as that article mentions about Woodrow Wilson starting up building ship programs for the war, and that continued on, obviously, to World War II. The battleship New Jersey, which is now across the river, was built here in Philadelphia, along with several other battleships.
And the battleship New Jersey has been doing a wonderful job in educating the people on the waterfront and combining the two waterfronts.
They have. It's a wonderful thing that we have here in the town. So the Navy Yard goes back to over almost 200 years now. And the Navy Yard ended its career as an official Navy Yard in 1995 when it was shut down. And there's a long history associated with that, with a lot of things. But in 95 was the end. I was there when we closed the base down, and I retired shortly right after that.
Well,
stayed in the area.
Your career, part of your career was at the Navy Yard.
Yes, we had the tail end of it, yes.
Yes, and where did you serve when you were at the Navy Yard in the tail end?
I was at the headquarters for the commander of the naval base, and we were responsible for exiting all of the outfits that were going elsewhere. But interestingly enough, there are still about 3,000 people who work for the Navy who are in the shipyard today. The shipyard is turned over. It's now an industrial development corporation. The wonderful things going on down there, about 14,000 people working there, including about 3,000 people still working for the Navy. The Navy, they have a big role in engineering in the Navy Yard that's being filled by Naval Systems Engineering Center in the Navy Yard still. So it shut down the Navy Yard itself for building ships, but we have a big support program still going on there. And one of the things that we have that's not associated with the Navy is the command that I'm at, which is the Chapel of Four Chaplains,
exactly,
which is a private foundation. So we lease our building. The chapel was built in the Navy Yard in 1942. It functioned until 95 when it shut down. And then the Chapel of Four Chaplains Memorial Foundation moved in there in the year 2000.
And
we've been there ever since.
It is a beautiful building on the grounds of the Navy Yard. And this is the chapel that we've brought in. There's also a special project that you have going where people can memorialize their loved ones.
Well, one thing I'll say about the chapel is that our primary outreach right now is toward veterans and taking care of the full scope of what veterans need today. There's a lot of issues today with veterans in the area of homelessness, joblessness, substance abuse, etc., that we're helping to address. So we operate out of that building that you just showed the picture of, and in front of the building on our campus we have several memorials. We have a memorial there to submarine veterans of World War II. We have a memorial there to the Dorchester. The flagpole was dedicated to all of the people that went down on the Dorchester. That's a whole story in and of itself. The four chaplains were on the Dorchester when it was sunk and torpedoed in World War II and went down.
And we have that picture here.
There's a picture of the four chaplains. That's from one of our banquets. We hold a banquet every year around the anniversary of the sinking, February 3rd.
Actually, it's almost always on February 3rd,
It's almost always on, but we usually vary it because we don't like to compete with Sundays because that's usually Super Bowl Sunday, so we have to vary it. So next year will be February 6th, which is a Thursday night in 2020. So anyway, getting back to the function, our function in the Navy Yard, that memorial that you have there is an anchor memorial, and it's dedicated to all those lost at sea. This was actually started by the Italian Navy veterans who lived in Philadelphia, who relocated here, and they got that anchor from the Italian Navy. It comes off the Americo Vespucci, which is their sailing training ship. It's one of what we call a tall ship.
And can you tell our viewers who American Vespucci?
Oh, Americo Vespucci was an Italian explorer way back in the 17th century, and the name America comes from Americo Vespucci.
Oh, thank you.
That's how that goes. But the anchor was given to us by the Italian Navy. And it's a long story about how it ended up in the Philadelphia Navy Yard in front of the chapel, but we decided that we needed to dedicate an anchor out there to all those lost at sea. And what it became was not only for those lost at sea, but also for those who are anchors in our lives. So surrounding that anchor are memorial bricks from people and organizations from all over the country that are honoring either somebody who was lost at sea or somebody who was an anchor in their life. and that's been a very, very successful memorial for us. And all that work around it, the granite base and all, was all done by Italian stonemasons from South Philadelphia.
It's been an incredible project to watch bloom while you've been chairman down there. Where did your military career take you, Captain?
Well, my military career, being in the Navy, you go on ships. At least in my case, I was a surface warfare officer, so I served on ships. We have part of the Navy deals with submarines, part of the Navy deals with aircraft and aircraft carriers. Mine was surface ships. So as a result, I got to see most of the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. In my career, I was stationed on various ports on the East Coast, and I was also involved with the first Gulf War in 1990 and 1991.
So you must like being on the Delaware River every day.
Well, after my Navy career, I went with a commercial shipping company in Philadelphia. So, and we contracted with the Navy, so we were operating Navy ships for the Navy and the Maritime Administration using civilian crews. So I really never left the Navy. It was that part, after I retired from Keystone Shipping Company, that I decided to go back to the Navy Yard and work in the Chapel of Four Chaplains. Now, there are several reasons why I did that, but primarily it was because it's an organization that helps veterans, and I like to help veterans. The other thing is that they were in financial difficulty at the time, and they asked me to help bail them out of that. It took 3 years, but we finally got them into the black in their financial operations. And we've been on the positive side now for the past 3. This will be our 4th year.
And you know, staying on the chapel, there is no fee for the tour of the chapel. And it is
no, anybody
open
comes
to the
in,
public.
we get people who visit there every day. We get a lot of people coming in. The chapel is dedicated to the 4 chaplains and the 672 people who went down on the Dorchester. Now, you know as well as I do, when you die at sea, there is no cemetery because the bodies go to the bottom of the ocean. So we have encased in bronze the names of all 672 people who went down, and also the names of the 230 survivors. That's how we know the story of the 4 chaplains giving up their life jackets and going down with the ship. So that act of selfless service is what we celebrate today all over the country. And today, even to this day, we are getting visitors from those 902 families, survivors and those who went down on the ship. And today we're getting visits from their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, grandnieces, great-grandnieces.
It's an amazing thing.
And they still come in and they want to know what happened to their relative who was on the ship. And we can pretty much tell them that, depending upon what their job was, whether they were an Army passenger or a member of the Merchant Marine crew or a member of the Navy Armed Guard, what transpired in either their successful rescue or in their demise.
And with all the ancestry, the interest in ancestry today, it's nice to piece those histories together.
People want to know. They really want to know what their background was and what happened with this event.
They do. And the other thing that is news to share on the chapel is that it's open to be used for weddings.
Well, the chapel is a very busy place. We have a lot of weddings there. As I said, there were 14,000 people working in the Navy Yard now. If they aren't affiliated with a church or a synagogue, they come to us, and we are happy to host their wedding. And not only that, we also have funerals. We have had funerals for many veterans. Last year we had a funeral for a Tuskegee Airman who passed away. That was a beautiful thing because they sent up an honor guard from Dover Air Force Base, and they did very well with that.
And will you tell our viewers what the Tuskegee Airmen, just in a short...
Tuskegee Airmen, briefly. In World War II, unfortunately, the armed forces were segregated. So we had African Americans in the military, but they couldn't take on all of the jobs because it was a segregated force. So one of the things they did was they took a bunch of African Americans and trained them to fly airplanes. And they did this at the Tuskegee Institute down south, and hence they got the name the Tuskegee Airmen. And they were very successful in running missions over in Europe. In bombing missions, they were actually the fighter pilots who were protecting our bombing aircraft. They were very successful at that, and they had an excellent record. And these Tuskegee Airmen, of course, are now all in their 90s, the few that are still alive. And when one of them died, he was from Philadelphia, they had his funeral at the Chapel of Four Chaplains. And just about 2 weeks ago, there was a Coast Guardman on active duty in Philadelphia who was killed in an automobile accident. Unfortunately, that was an incident that was a very unfortunate thing, but the entire sector, Philadelphia, showed up for memorial service for that particular Coast Guardsman at the chapel. So we run the gamut of things that we do, weddings,
really do.
funerals, et cetera,
And, you know,
and
the
a lot of concerts now.
And the military is so close to Hank Cisco because he himself is a
That's
veteran.
correct.
So he always wanted to have you here. So it was
That's
so
right.
great that we were able to share all this today. Brings us a little bit to your Italian roots, because I know you have a little, for our listeners that are from the Philadelphia region, you have a little bit of an accent.
That's right.
So you have to tell us where you grew up.
If you can't already tell, that's New York City.
But what part of New
In
York?
Brooklyn, New York, where else, right? And it was an interesting area to grow up in. I will say that it built character. It was an Italian neighborhood in an Italian parish, the whole thing. We were a bilingual family growing up, so I got a chance to speak and learn a bit of the language, although I lost a lot of it. I will say that when I first started school, it was a little confusing because you didn't know which words were English, which words were Italian, really. But it all worked out great. And I'm very
And you
proud.
picked up some good recipes too.
Well,
You're the cooker in the family
Well,
and
now
the
I am.
ravioli maker.
I always found that cooking relaxed me. And I remember being in the kitchen with my mother and grandmother. I wish I had learned more back then than I did, but I absorbed it enough to take it to today, and I enjoy cooking.
You definitely do. You definitely do. And one of the things you're going to do for us is be with us on October 23rd at lunchtime at the foot of the Frank Rizzo statue. It's going to be Frank Rizzo's 99th birthday.
That's correct.
And Italian-American with Italian roots in South Philadelphia. Can you tell us a little bit about his history and support of the Navy Yard?
Okay, one of the things I like about Mayor Rizzo and also Hank Cisco, for that matter, is that they are very inclusive. We all came from Italian backgrounds, but we are very inclusive and we honor all cultures. And that's the other thing I like about the Chapel of Four Chaplains. We stand for selfless service and interfaith cooperation. So we honor all cultures, just like Mayor Rizzo and Hank Cisco did all of their lives. Now, the interesting thing about Mayor Rizzo is that he normally doesn't get credit for that. But one of the things that he did do was that in the Navy Yard, back in the 70s, there was a lack of work for building Navy ships, so they weren't building Navy ships anymore, but they were repairing them. And that work also got very lean. So there was something called Surface Life Expansion Program for aircraft carriers. These were huge contracts to extend the life of all these aircraft carriers, the Forrestal class, the Independence. These were all ships that came, the Kitty Hawk, they all came through Philadelphia. And the reason why Philadelphia got that job over Newport News, which is the other place that repairs large ships, they build all the big aircraft carriers in Newport News Shipyard in Virginia. But the reason why we got that job is because Mayor Rizzo proved to Congress and to the Navy that they can build them cheaper and more efficiently, or they can repair these ships and do these service life extensions on these aircraft carriers more efficiently in Philadelphia. And that's exactly what happened. And the ships were, we call them SLEP, S-L-E-P. They were slept in the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and that gave the Philadelphia Navy Yard another 10 years of life.
It is amazing what goes on down there. Growing up in South Philadelphia, I remember you could never go past the iron gates.
That's correct.
And I would hear stories of my aunts from World War II that used to go, when the ships would dock, they would wait outside the gates for the soldiers to come out. But we've had the experience with you to host the RollsRoyce Owners Club.
That's correct.
Part-time hobby group of my husband's. And we had we met at the chapel for an orientation, and then we had a driving tour through the grounds of the chapel, of the Navy Yard.
And the Navy Yard. And what we did was I took you out to see all the inactive ships.
It was amazing.
People don't realize this, but Philadelphia is one of two, the others on the West Coast, facilities where we dock ships that are no longer in service. They're decommissioned, they're taken out of service, and they're put in Philadelphia. There's about 40 ships down there that are going to be used either for sold to a foreign navy or scrapped. And this is an interesting thing. So you saw all the ships that were there that day. I hate to see these ships being decommissioned. All the ships I served on were all decommissioned, but that's part of their life. That's just, ships don't last forever.
But is that one special airplane hangar down there?
Yeah, the aircraft carrier, John F. Kennedy, is still there.
Yes.
When you were there, when we did that tour of the aircraft carrier Forrestal was also there. That has since been taken out and sunk and made into a reef out at sea.
But can you tell us a little bit of what was the history of the one that's there now?
Yeah, the John F. Kennedy was obviously named after President Kennedy, and it had a service of about 40 years, and it was time to retire it. So it's down there now waiting its fate. We don't know whether it's going to be a museum somewhere or whether they're going to have to scrap that ship as well. But it's very, very difficult because it's such a massive ship, and it sits there right now. If you go to the Urban Outfitters cafeteria, you can sit there and have lunch, and you can watch the John F. Kennedy. It's sitting right there.
It's just an amazing place to go, you know, if they get a chance to take their families for a drive through the grounds of the Navy Yard. It's amazing.
That's right. And one more thing I want to say about that,
Sure.
with the Service Life Extension Program that Mayor Rizzo was responsible for, people have to realize that because of that, it injected millions of dollars into the economy of Philadelphia and saved the workforce in Philadelphia. And I think that's what his objective ultimately was to bring those dollars to Philadelphia. You want to spend them anyway, rather than spend them down in Virginia, which had plenty of work. We got the work here for Philadelphia.
Well, he's going to be 99 on October 23rd, and in Hank Cisco style, he goes to the foot of that statue every year.
Good.
So with Hank still in his honor, we're going to be doing that on October 23rd for any of our listeners that want to join us. 12:30 at the foot of the Frank Rizzo statue at JFK Boulevard between 15th and 16th on Broad Street. Can't miss it. Big statue, big presence. Actually, Dom Giordano is going to be hosting with us that day, and he is 1210, the big talker. So save that date, October 23rd. But we're taping at the Norristown High School, and Hank's been devoted to the students here for so long. You have a new student program coming up it's actually been going on, this essay contest. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The chapel is a very, very busy place. The Chapel of Four Chaplains Memorial Foundation, we have 4 core programs. One is our Legion of Honor program, where we recognize ordinary people who do extraordinary things, people who are contributing more than above and beyond to their community. Our second program is our outreach to chaplains. We train first responder chaplains all over the country, including in Pennsylvania, very heavily in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Delaware for obvious reasons. But this program trains first responder chaplains all over the country. We have a team of chaplains that do that. And some of the team that's involved with the training program were a part of our emergency response team in response to 9/11 in New York City back in 2001. Our third program is our outreach to veterans. I already mentioned this. We have a huge outreach now that takes care of all of the issues. A veteran comes to us for innumerable problems. Some are very, very, you might consider trivial. Some are important to families, like having an honor guard at the funeral. And then we deal with the big issues like post-traumatic stress disorder and substance abuse. And it's interesting, Barbara, because most of the first time we contact with those veterans that are dealing with these big issues is not the veteran itself, but their family comes in to see us and tell us, look, this individual has these enormous problems. How can we help? Exactly. So we're very, very proud of that. And that's our third stool of these 4 programs for 4 chaplains. The fourth item is our scholarship program on our education of children. So we have a scholarship program that students that are eligible from 5th grade through high school, so Norristown High School, certainly the students here are eligible
and
for
other
this.
high schools in the region.
And all over the country, because we get
yes.
entries from everywhere, including the state of Alaska, California, Texas, everywhere. And we give out $5,000 in prizes for students who write essays or do YouTube videos or do artwork. And we have it committee that judges this, and the top 4 students in each category get cash prizes. The top prize is for a high school senior, $1,000 scholarship.
Nice, nice.
So,
and it's usually on a theme.
And it's on a theme, and this year we're happy to say that the theme will be the selfless service of Rosie the Riveter. Now, you mentioned the Navy Yard earlier, and that you had to wait outside the gate.
Right.
But the Rosies, during World War II, these were women that were hired by the Defense Department.
But my aunt weren't those women. They weren't Rosie the Riveters. They were waiting outside the gate.
Yeah, they were waiting outside. But these Rosie the Riveters worked in the shipyard, so they were actually working on repairing and building ships.
How
They were
vast
working
that?
as draftspersons, drafting all the blueprints for the ships, because you have to always have a blueprint before you do anything on an actual ship. And they were actually doing riveting, and in those days, very limited
The
welding
labor work that men were doing.
the men were doing, but the men had to go off to fight in a war. Women were not. Women, even though they were volunteering to go in the Army and Navy, they were not permitted combat in those days, even though some of them were very, very close to combat lines. But the Rosie the Riveters were the women who took up the slack in industry all over the country, aircraft factories, shipyards, munition plants, everywhere. So our theme, and it opens now on October 1st, so you need to go to our website, www.forchaplains, that's FOURCHAPLAINS.org, to get an application for this theme, Rosie the River, the selfless service. Who are the Rosie the Riveters? We want to know who they are. Do research on somebody. They're, unfortunately, they are all in their 90s now.
They're dwindling because they're in their 90s, but they're around.
Yeah, they're around, so let's get the kids to go ahead and research it. Cool. Maybe there was somebody in your family that was a Rosie the River that you want to tell us about. Write an essay, YouTube video, or artwork, and we'd be very happy to consider it for our contest.
I love it. It's a great idea.
It's a wonderful idea.
You have done so much now. How long have you been active there?
I'm on my 6th year in the chapel.
6th year. Now, when we were coming here with some of the students, they were asking you about your medals and your dress uniform, and I got to ask you to always, I love a man in a uniform, so I asked you to wear your uniform with us today. Could you explain it so that our viewers that are the young students out there might identify or get to understand what all that beautiful color is on your chest?
Okay, well, there are some things common to all the services, and that's what's here. These are ribbons that identify the different campaigns and situations that I was involved in during my career.
And a campaign is a conflict of some way.
Like for the Desert Storm, the first one, which is that bottom one right there.
Right.
They all mean different things. They're all different campaigns, Navy Marine Corps medals, National Defense Medal, all that stuff. But the important thing is that the uniform is different. They have an Army ROTC unit here. So they won't recognize this uniform, but they will recognize these, because these are very common to all the services. This tells our rank. This means that I'm a captain. The star means that I'm a line officer. If you're a chaplain, there's a cross or the tablets or a star from the Star and Crescent for Muslims, tablets for Jewish chaplains. But Supply Corps has a different thing, but stars, it means I was a line officer, a ship driver, surface warfare officer, whatever you want to call it. But this is actually a summer uniform.
And we're right on the brink.
And we're right on the brink. October 1st we change. But it's very comfortable, and that's why I like wearing it in all this hot weather we've had.
Yes.
So a couple of the other things I want to say is that the chapel also is open to veterans. We get them there all the time. But we have concerts there now, which we hadn't had in the past.
So who's appearing at your concerts?
So and these are very interesting. We have an organization called the Yo Cuz Foundation, which deals with bullying high school students. So it's also appropriate for Norristown High School. Their concert is going to be a Halloween concert where they do this great show. These kids are very, very talented, and that's October 24th in the evening at the chapel. We also have hooked up with the Marian Anderson Foundation. Now, you know who Marian Anderson is. And you know what she went through in order to be able to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during, invited by Franklin Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt. So there is a foundation in Philadelphia in her honor, and they also are doing concerts with us. We have 2 concerts coming up. Their anniversary concert on November 16th, and then they're also doing a Christmas concert on December 21st. In addition to that, we have a local group, a local jazz group, a 30-piece orchestra.
Wow.
Wendell Hobbs and his Master of Jazz. There are a bunch of pickup groups from pickup guys from all over South Philadelphia, and they do a wonderful show. And their Christmas concert is on November 30th at the chapel. So we have all of these concerts.
That is a new program.
Yeah, that's all new for us. And
that is wonderful.
It started out.
How much to get in? Is there an admission?
Yeah, there's admission for all these different things. You need to go online on our website or contact the individual organizations for admissions.
But they're reasonable?
But the admissions are very reasonable, and these are very professional people putting on these concerts. I have to tell you that to see these kids from the Yo Cuz concert put on their show, their Halloween show, on Marian Anderson, and their singers or Wendell Hobbs and his orchestra. These are all and they have professional singers and dancers, and they had a tap dancer there last time. It's a wonderful show. So I have here, I brought this with me because this is a list of all our events through the end of the year.
Right, and they can get our viewers can catch that on your website.
On our website, and this list is
forchaplains.org, right?
Yeah, forchaplains.org. And this here is just events that take us till the end of the year. There's 10 things on here.
Yes.
I mean, we've been very, very busy, and we want to be busy. We want to outreach to veterans. Our primary thing right now, in addition to reaching out to children and then reaching out to chaplains, is to take care of our veterans and making sure that they are getting the support from the VA that they really deserve.
And you've also getting an increase in tourism there as well.
Yeah, we are.
Your numbers have increased a lot?
Yeah, we are. When I first got there, maybe 6 years ago, our numbers were down below 100. And now we are probably doing 100 a month.
That is wonderful.
Amazing.
Well, you know, Captain, I can't thank you enough for coming here today, sharing your love of your history, of the military, the great things you're doing down at the Chapel of the Four Chaplains at the Navy Yard, and, you know, your special tribute to Hank Cisco. And
in honor of all this, Barbara, because I know you love this stuff, I make my own limoncello, as you know. This is something that I inherited from my grandparents, being in the basement, making the wine and the grappa and everything else. So here's some homemade limoncello from my house to yours.
I can't thank you enough, because you do. Captain Lou makes the best limoncello and even orangecello. You treat that orangecello
yeah,
as well.
That too.
So thank you, Captain. It was really a great pleasure, and thank you for joining me today. And I'd like to thank our viewers out there for listening, and hope that you'll join us again. Try and take your family down to the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Stop in at the Chapel of the Four Chaplains. The doors are always open during the day, and you'll have a good time and a great experience. Ciao. Salute.